All right, so the next thing we're going to talk about is what is referred to as a symbol. Okay. So I mentioned when we were talking about the history of Adobe Animate. Adobe Animate was originally invented in the late 90s to create an animation for the web. Okay. And long story short, back in the late 90s, internet speeds were very, very slow. The internet's slow now, that's nothing compared to what it was back in the late 90s. It was so slow that things like videos were just too big for most browsers to handle. So Adobe Macromedia Flash at that time, they were developing animations for the web. And so the big part of the animation was keeping files small. Okay. That's actually part of the reason why Adobe Animate is vector-based as opposed to raster-based. A lot of other two-dimensional animation programs are raster-based, like Toon Boom and some other ones. But Adobe Animate was specifically made vector because vector files are actually smaller than raster files, and that helped keep the file size down a little bit. The other thing that helped to keep this file size smaller was something called a symbol. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about what a symbol is. So I have like a little analogy to explain a symbol, but a symbol in Adobe Animate is a reusable graphic. Okay. And actually it's reusable animation because you can actually have a timeline if you want in a symbol. We'll talk about that more next week and things like that. But a symbol is a reusable graphic used to help make the file size smaller and to help make animations quicker. Okay. So to fully really kind of understand how a symbol works, let's imagine I draw, I get out my artist pencils, my 8H through 8B pencils, I'm drawing like a physical, drawing here. And I make a really awesome picture of Spider-Man. Like, guys, this is like a really, really awesome picture of Spider-Man. Okay. And, it takes about 3 hours of work to do this. Okay. Then I meet up with a friend of mine and I show him my totally awesome picture of Spider-Man. And he goes, "Hey, man, that's awesome. Can I get a copy of that?" So, because I'm a nice friend, I decide to redraw the picture again. And that takes another 3 hours. Well, he shows three of his friends and they all want a picture. So if you did out the math of each photo, if each drawing of Spider-Man takes me 3 hours, doing three of them would take me 9 hours. Okay. I don't have that kind of time and work. That's a lot of work. Okay. To do 9 hours of work. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I do is I take the picture of Spider-Man that I did, I take it to a copy machine and I make a copy. Okay. The copy is not as fluid as the original, but it also takes a lot quicker. It takes like 30 seconds as opposed to 9 hours. Okay. So what does that have anything to do with animation? Well, when you are in Adobe Animate, I'm just going to make a new layer here. Let's turn these off temporarily. And let's say I draw something. I'm just going to draw like a house. Okay. A little symbol here, right? And then I make a new blank keyframe and I draw another house. Okay. The thing about it is each drawing that I make, even if it's literally the same drawing, the program has to calculate all of the components of that drawing. Okay. And so each one of these drawings is getting added to the total file size of my Adobe Animate, my .fla file. Okay. So if we have a graphic that we are reusing, like for instance, let's just say for the sake of argument, I have a house that's going to show up in multiple parts of my animation. Rather than redrawing it and having to have Adobe Animate calculate it, we can make what's called a symbol. And the symbol will take the original drawing and store it actually in the library, the same library that we were storing our imported, pixel-based drawings and stuff and Adobe Animate or Adobe Illustrator vector files. And we can make copies of the original. Okay. Those copies are actually going to be like going to be a much smaller version, file size wise, for Animate to calculate than having to calculate a new drawing every time. Okay, so hopefully that kind of made a little bit of sense there. So I'm going to turn this back on. So right now I have this character. Okay. If I select it, you can see that it is a shape. Okay. I want to take this shape and I want to convert it into a symbol. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this whole thing. I'm using click and drag, to highlight the whole area. You could also hold down the shift key and do something like that as well. But I'm just going to click and drag to make sure I get everything. And what I'm going to do is convert my current drawing into a symbol. So I'm going to go to modify and I'm going to go to convert to symbol or F8 on your keyboard. I think you can also do it from here now. Yeah, this little option here that looks like a little shamrock or a spade, I should say, with a little arrow. I'm kind of old school, so I'm just going to do it this way. Convert to symbol. Okay. That's going to give you this little pop-up menu. This is going to be the name of your symbol. This is what's going to appear in your library. You can call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter if you have spaces or special characters. I'm just going to call it smiley face. Okay. Under type, you're going to see where it says graphic, button clip, and movie clip. These are different types of symbols. And to be honest, we really don't need these two in this class. Those are more technical for interactive stuff, which we're not going to do. So we're just going to keep it as a graphic. Okay. If you see all of this stuff, don't worry about this. This has to do with programming, which we're not doing. Okay. I'm going to hit OK. Now you can tell that this has become a symbol because it has a little box around it, but also you can tell this is a symbol because if you highlight it, instead of saying like shape or drawing object or something like that, it should have this little symbol here and it should say what type of symbol it is, and it's a graphic. Okay. And it should say instance of, meaning a copy of, and then whatever we called this. So if I go to library, this is my symbol. Okay, this is the master copy of that drawing. Okay. Now what's going to happen is if I click on my item in my library and I drag it, every time I do that, I make a copy of it. Okay, the way I like to think of it, this might be a very dated reference, but back in the day with libraries, there used to be something called a reference section. These were books that like you weren't allowed to take out of the library. So you had to like photocopy or, do a copy of them in the library, and you would keep the copy of them, but you wouldn't get to take out the original. And that's kind of what this is. This is your original. These are the copies or the instances of the original. Okay, so notice that all of my copies look exactly like the original. Okay, you cannot edit them. If I try to draw on these with like a brush or something, you'll notice it actually goes behind it. Okay, because by default, anything that is a symbol or a copy of the original symbol cannot be edited from just drawing on. Okay. Now, let's say I did want to edit this. So you can edit your symbols once they've become symbols. What I'm going to do is go here and I'm going to highlight this and I'm going to go to the menu, which is a little sort of 3 arrows there in the top right corner. And I'm going to go to where it says edit. All right, so you wouldn't know this because Adobe Animate's user interface is not sometimes the greatest, but this is actually editing mode. Okay. This is not your normal stage. This is actually a special place where you can edit your symbol. Okay. So right now you'll notice because my symbol was made of a vector graphic, I can actually go and make changes to it. So for instance, this is like the fill of that eye. I'll just make it blue. Or maybe I'm going to grab the brush and maybe I'm just going to give him like a little kind of goatee or something. Boom, boom, boom. Okay. I can make any kind of changes I want. Now, if you want to get out of editing mode, this is what you need to do. You need to, you'll up here, you'll notice this is it has this little symbol. The symbol means, or this icon means it's a symbol. I was going to say the symbol is a symbol, but that sounds redundant. But this is the smiley face. This means I'm working with it. I want to press on the little arrow here, and that gets me out of editing mode. Now, you'll notice a couple things. One, you go to your library, and your smiley face has updated. Cool. Anytime you were to take out a new symbol or make a copy of it, it's going to reflect the new changes. Two, any instances you made before are automatically going to update. You'll notice that all of these updated as soon as this one was changed. Okay. So if you make any changes to the original, you will update all of these. Okay. Another way to edit is, instead of editing from the library itself, if you click on something that is already a symbol. So this is a symbol, I can tell because of the properties. It says, object graphic instance of smiley face. I'm gonna double click, and notice how the other ones have become gray. That's because I'm now in what is referred to as edit in place mode. Okay, so instead of taking you to a new window, it's just editing the symbol in the stage itself. Okay, so it's kind of the same idea, where if I make any changes here, like if I make this red, or let's give my character some nice rosy cheeks, you can see that all of the other ones are automatically updating because I'm in edit mode. Okay. Once again, to get out of it, notice I have, this is my symbol. I'm going to press on the little left facing arrow, and that gets me out of this back to the standard, back to my stage. I would recommend, when you start off doing this, to edit, if you do want to edit it, to do it from the library, just because I think that's a little bit more specific. Just be careful when you're double clicking on a symbol. If you see something like this, that means you're in editing mode. Just be careful not to make any changes to anything that you don't want to make changes to. Even though these are all copies of the original, you can make them slightly different. Things like the free transform tool. Notice that I am allowed to scale them, and it does not, edit the original. So anything like a position change, rotation change, things like that will not, edit the original in any way, shape, or form. Okay. There's even some other options you can play around with. Once something is a symbol, under properties, there's something called a color effect. So for instance, if you wanted to say, for instance, tint one of your characters, you could go under tint. This is the color that it's tinting. So for instance, if I made this red, this is 100% red, tinted red. This is 0% red. If I set it to say 50, this is like a half tint. So I'm tinting this one instance, but it's not affecting the original in any way. Another one you can play around with under color effects is called alpha. Alpha is basically like opacity. If you have 100% alpha, you have 100% opaqueness, so you can't see through the item. 50% makes something semi-transparent. As you can see, I can kind of see through to this character that's below. Or if it's set to 0, it's invisible. Okay, so things like the color tinting and playing around with the opacity allows you to make an instance slightly different, but doesn't technically change the original instance in any way. All right, I'm going to make 2 instances here. Now, anytime you edit the original, you're going to edit any copy of it. I showed you that before. What if I wanted to make changes to this, but I don't want it to edit the original? Okay. Now, technically, you can't do that. Now, there are some workarounds. One, you could make a copy or a duplicate of this and have technically 2 different symbols that look the same, and then work with one symbol and have that change and then not. So, if, what I'm trying to say here is like, well, I could do a duplicate, call this smiling face 2. And since technically they look the same, if I make a change on one, it's not going to affect the other one because they're technically two different symbols. Okay, that's one way you could do that. Another way you could do it is, I'm going to just have one type, is you can take any symbol and you can actually break it apart. So it goes back to being a shape. Okay. So if I take this and I go to break apart, or Command or Control B, this actually goes back to being a shape. It's a shape that looks like the symbol, but technically it's not. Okay, it just looks like the symbol, but it's not technically considered by the program to be a symbol. Therefore, if you go and you start making changes to things, if I go in here and, so for instance, let's change the color and make it like, I don't know, green or something. And let's go back and give him a bigger beard or something like that. It's not going to make any changes to this because I'm not changing the symbol. I'm actually changing a graphic that kind of looks like the symbol. So it's kind of a workaround. Okay. One other thing, this is something that, sometimes people make mistakes with, is when they go to the menu here or the insert, sometimes there's convert to symbol and there's new symbol. Okay. What's the difference? Well, I'm just going to draw something real quick. Okay, let's say I have this red square here. This is a drawing that already exists, right? We drew it. So what I would be doing is modifying and converting an existing graphic into a symbol. Okay, you can give it a name. What insert symbol does is when you insert a symbol, there is no graphic yet. You're just making the symbol first, and then you're going to draw into it. So I'm going to make a graphic. Let's say I'm going to call the graphic face. We're going to set it to be a graphic. We're going to hit OK. Okay. So it does create it in my library, but technically it doesn't exist yet. I haven't drawn anything. So then what I would need to do is, go inside the symbol and then, draw the graphic however I want however I want the graphic to be. There's my graphic now. That's what my face is. And then when I'm done, with it, then I can get out of editing mode and there's my graphic that then I could use if I want to. Okay. So that's, either way is fine. Some people like to draw something first and then convert it. Some people already know they want something to be a symbol, so they make the symbol first and then draw into it and then, make changes from there. Either way is fine. All right. So I want you guys to try this out because working with symbols is going to be important for us in Adobe Animate. So this is exercise 2.